Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Quant Tutor. Today we'll be doing question number 9 of the Jan 2022 P1 paper. Okay, so the question has given us a nice graph, right? And we have a graph, we have a few points. We can see that we have point P, point Q, and the origin as well. Okay, and we have an equation of this curve, right? Y is equals to A cos x minus 30. Now, what we know is that point P is a minimum point. Okay, that's the minimum point, and we know that point Q is a maximum point. Okay, I'm going to skip, and you can see it here. And we also know the coordinates of point P, right, which is 30 and 3. Okay, minus 3, so negative 3. Sorry. Okay, so we have this information now. Now, what we are asked to write here is write down the value of A. Right? So now we know that we have an equation which is y is equals to A cos x minus 3 minus 30, and we want to find the value of A. In this case, it's a nice and easy thing to do, right? Because we know that the minimum point here, the amplitude here is 3, right? So if this is 3 here, we know that this length here is, this distance here is minus 3. And we know automatically that this distance with the maximum point will be 3, right? Because cos is a cyclic curve, right? The amplitude is the same up and down, right? So the amplitude is here is 3 here. So it's either minus 3 or 3. Now the question here is it 3 or is it minus 3? Is it 3 or is it minus 3, right? So what you have to identify is what was the original equation, okay? So if we look at this equation here, if you look at this graph here, we can see that cos x minus 30, right? So when drawing graphs, you have to realize that whenever you have a number that is subtracting or adding an x, right, in a bracket, so it's x minus 30, it means that this is performing a transformation on x, right? So that means that if this 30 wasn't there, right, we would have a curve that basically looks like this, okay? Because a cos x curve basically looks like this, right? Now, if we apply minus 30 here, so if we say x minus 30 on this graph, right, we know that this graph will go to the right. So the graph will look somewhat like this. Okay, so let's say that the original graph was somewhat like this, right? Now we know that this graph would move to the right because it's always the opposite of the sign when it's transforming x, okay? So we know that this graph will be somewhat like this. It would have moved a little bit to the right. So you can see here that that is clearly not the same as how this graph looks like, right? So now let's try and do with a curve. So let's say that so this was y is equal, okay, let's y is equals to minus cos x, right? Now let's say that this curve is now going to be cos x, negative cos x, sorry. So this was positive cos x. Now for the negative cos x, the graph will look somewhat like this, right? And now when you apply the transformation of minus 30, means the graph shifts to the left, you will see that this line is now here, right? Something like that. And now what you can see here is that this looks a lot more like the curve that we have, right? And so that means that the original equation is actually y is equals to minus cos x, right? That is the original equation. And we know that we have applied a 30-degree transformation here, which means the graph has moved to the right. But now we've also applied a y-axis transformation, which has caused this to be minus 30, which has caused point P to be minus 30, minus 3, sorry, instead of minus 1, right? And so because of that, we know that this transformation here has to be it multiplied by 3, right? That's why it expanded. It basically stretched, right? This part became 3 and this part became negative 3 instead of 1 and minus 1. So we know that the value of A here is equals to negative 3. If you're not clear about this, please feel free to drop in a question and I'll happily answer this. All right, now let's go on and do part B. Okay, I'm going to erase everything from here now, and I'm going to start with a nice clean slate here, given though that we have the equation of the curve, which is now minus 3 cos x minus 30, right? So this is something that we had deduced from part A. Part B says the point Q is shown in figure 6 and is a maximum point. So this is a max point, right? Okay, so as I mentioned, right, if the minimum point is minus 3, the y of the minimum point is minus 3, the point of the maximum will have to be 3, right? So we already know that this is the y value of this curve. So we know that y is equals to 3, right? So I'm going to put y3 in there, and I'm going to solve this equation for x. Okay, so I'm going to get minus 3 cos x minus 30, right? So I'm going to subtract this, and it's going to be minus 1. So I can say that cos x minus 30 is equals to negative 1. Now I'm going to do x minus 30 will be equals to cos inverse of negative 1, right? If you put this in your calculator, you will get this is equals to 180 degrees, okay? But this is not your final answer yet, nor is it adding 30 to the other side, okay? So what you need to understand now is when you do a cos inverse, it's only going to give you the first part of that equation. So it's only going to give you the first minus 1, okay? Because it's a cyclic value, right? So what we have found out with 180 is this one, okay? But now imagine that if this is 180, this is 180, this is 180, right? So this point is 180, 180, 180, 180, and then 180. So you can see here that 180 occurs 5 times before it reaches the point that we actually want to reach. This one that we found here, it's only for this point here. We just know that the first peak with relation to the peak that was shifted, right? We're not counting the shifted peak because we are just assuming we haven't done the minus 30 yet. We are only assuming that the cos curve looks like this, right? So from this curve now, we know that this point is 180, right? And we are trying to find the third positive peak. But don't forget that it passes all the negative peaks as well. So all the negative peaks are also included. And when you count here, you will see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means 180 occurs 5 times. So what x is actually going to be is I'm going to multiply 5 multiplied by 180, and then you want to shift this by 30, right? Because we've discussed that this cos curve now has shifted to the right, right? Because if there's a transformation on the x. So we have to add 30 to what we get for this as well. And when you solve this, the answer will come down to be 930 degrees. So there you go. We are done with the question. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to put it in the comment box, and I will make sure to answer any doubt you have. If you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also share this around with your friends. Thank you, and we'll be back for the last question in the next video.